Okay. So good evening, everyone. So tonight is Angular APAC meetup, and we have the beloved Greg back to teach us like advanced schematics. So he was here like last December, and then he was so kind to answer all kind of questions on Angular testing. So I love him so much that I have asked him back. And then he he's back after Lunar New Year. So in the year of Tiger, you are the first guest in Angular APAC. Yeah. So
Awesome.
yeah, and then after this event, we have more event that you will participate as a host because there will be an Angular testing event on Tuesday, like Hong Kong, like my time. And then before your event, Eagle Mana will come back to talk about his future or his big plan in expert live meeting. So if you guys love Eagle or you miss him so much after he left Google, so please join and see him and give him a virtual hug because I want to give him a virtual hug if I haven't gone to bed at 12 midnight. And then more event from Anglo Africa. So Oya and Oya is doing a fantastic job. He's getting off like these guest book and then Anglo South Asia, like we have Centaur and then more event from Anglo APAC. But today our guest, our main character is Greg, and then he's going to teach us like advanced schematic, and Aries is very probably is the first person to fire all kind of question. So after you teach us stuff, you probably need to handle more Q&A from like our attendees because we have a big group today. I mean, only you can attract like 19 people. So I love you, Greg. I really do.
Thank you. I love you too. Thank you for this great introduction. So, as I've been nicely introduced, my name is Greg, and I'm nerding out on Angular for some time since AngularJS. But hey, let's get to the point because I have so much stuff to talk. So please, open up your mind, and there will be some testing done too as well. So there's gonna be quite fun. I hope I keep it fun. So, and by the way, it's gonna be quite advanced. So, FYI. So let me share the screen. Here we go. All right. So the title of this talk is Advanced Schematics, and sort of the subtitle is the stuff you know is good for you, but feels weird to get started. So it's sort of like a healthy diet or whatever. You should be exercising, but maybe you always find an excuse not to do it. So it's sort of like kind of those things. Maybe a bad example, but I hope some people can relate to it. And I believe schematics is a very advanced topic and very, very powerful, super powerful. And when I started to learn them, I was like, okay, that stuff is pretty neat. And it's like a rabbit hole, right? The deeper I went, the more I saw that. And I was like, stunned that there is not a lot of good topics around this. So I decided to, hey, why don't I do a presentation? So it's the first time I'm actually making that presentation. So forgive me all, potential mistakes I make. So let's get it started. So what you will learn today, what you will not learn today. So because it's an advanced talk, you will not learn what and how to use NGG CLI. I mean, NGG is so basic, you just go to the documentation and find it. And we're going to be using NGG, but generally it's not a talk about how to use standard stuff. It's also not a talk about what is in to describe every single schematic Angular and generator, or maybe NX CLI and stuff like this. We're going to be looking at the source code for a little while, but we're not going to be going too much into the detail because it's super basic and there's tons of tutorials online. And then we're not going to talk about how to write hello world schematic. And funny enough, this is when you put a schematic in Google, this is all you're going to get, right? And this is just, let's change that. So what you will learn today, actually, you will learn what a schematic is good for. You will learn what architecture to follow when you actually design things in schematics and how to test them. So let's get to it. So what are the very common cases of schematics? I mean, you start Googling, you spend a little bit time on it, and then you will see it's pretty much to create stuff, create library, create module, create component, create services, pipes, guards, classes. You can even create classes, which is literally just, export class name with empty body. And then you can, when you're a little bit more advanced, you can go and say, oh, there is something called ng-new. It's not only ng generate, it's actually ng-new, ng-add, ng-update, which is very cool and very fun, especially when you know nothing about the particular library you wanna install in an Angular project. So it's very handy. So when you do the library, it's a good practice to actually create those schematics. But in general, that's really it. And how many people actually go and check what is ng-new and what is ng-add? I mean, except for the people, you just expect this stuff to work, right? And then, hello schematic example, like you start Googling and then you will see hello schematic example, or you will see hello schematic example in NX CLI, which is pretty much the same thing. It's just connecting different dots. So let's just change it because it starts to get a little bit annoying for people who really want to get to it. Okay, so what are schematics? So I ask this question quite a lot to people, and this is the common answer I get. It's a Node.js CLI command to create files. That's it. Well, true, but not only, actually. Though I would like to disassociate file creation with schematic. Schematic is much more. So I would like to come up with a new definition. It's a Node.js CLI command to modify your file system. That's it. If you modify, you not only create, you can delete, you can update, you can rearrange, you can rename. And it's not only sort of files, it's entire file system that you can deal with. And you have a very nice API to actually tackle that problem. So let's get into it. So my first approach to schematic was just epic. Well, epic fail. So technically, I started to look into it, and then I was like, of course, I went very quickly through basic examples, and then I was like, okay, how do I actually understand it? How I actually know what's happening? So I was like, banging my head all the time, and I was like, things don't work, things don't click, I can't just use this part and that part, and I would like to actually give you this condensed knowledge in my talk. So let's look at the first example. So this is example from Angular CLI, which is the Angular service. Like we all created services in our life, and this is literally what is happening. So you open the schematic, you have this file folder, and then you have like this weird looking stuff you have no idea about at the first look. And then you have the index, and you have even tests. That's really cool. And then you have a schema. So we're going to go into this more in detail, but I mean, you know the drill. And schema is just, explaining you what you can actually ask a schematic. So it's pretty much like a, CLI interface for it. The test, obviously, are tests. And then you look at the code. So you look at the code, and it looks pretty much like this. So very easy, right? So you don't know what's happening, really. But I can tell you what happens. Well, literally, you have those options coming in here. The only one option you care about is the flat option. And it's even sort of, set to true later. And then you call this other, it's not a schematic, it's a rule, but it's same, but different. But generally, there is this reusable piece of code called generate from files. What it does, it goes to your file folder and generate it and inject the templates there. That's it. So, if it's a flat, it just, do small modification, and that's it. All it does, it injects the parameters from your options into this, and it's already working on the file system. So already here, this means it's a variable called name, which uses the dasherize utility function. And then it will have those spec file and TS file. So the flat means them generate the spec file. And then you will come here, and that's it. So you just have import on top, injectable already provided in root, and the class name is classified, which means it's gonna, make a Pascal case, which means it's like Campbell case, but with the first letter capital. So it's a class name with the name postfix by service, adds an empty constructor. That's it. That's whole schematic. And then, if you're into templating your file system, that's all you have to do. But very often, for example, I started with a pretty complex use case. I wanted to inject a injection token in my module. And that was very, very specific use case I needed, because that stuff you can do. So you see, you look at it and you say, oh, I'm pretty mastering the schematics right now. Well, not really, because then you get to another example called the directive. And here we go. You go to 140 lines of code, which is a lot longer. And then you see, you always start with the default function. Okay, cool. I have my options, the same, same drill. I get something called the workspace. Okay, that's probably my workspace, my Angular project, because the workspace can contain multiple apps and multiple libraries, multiple projects in Angular. So that's probably it. There is some magic going on there. Then something called build default path. Okay. Then find module for that option. Okay. And then you go into and do a bunch of stuff like opening the selectors and stuff. And then you do the stuff I already described, which is applying on the templates. And then you look into here and it starts to get shaky a little bit, the bumpy road, because you say, okay, there's something called TypeScript source file, which I have no idea about. And then some host and change, like, what is this stuff? So then you can go and say, okay, directive is a component, right? So let me go to the component. Then you look in the component and it's same but different. It looks very similar, but not exactly, because this is using another functions in another places and slightly different validation for the selector. So you just look at this code, and this is quite longer. It's 160 lines of code. And then, I don't see any source file, or maybe just a function. So you can see a lot of inconsistency, even already in the Angular schematics. So I was pretty much like this. So, what is where, how do I make sense of it? And I just failed on this, right? So, I was thinking, what can I do? I scratched my head. And, when, like, I used to be an architect before, and so I'm used to looking at all kinds of code bases and making sort of a diagrams for it. So I'm going to show you what I learned. So this is how the schematics really work. All this stuff you can combine in 3 stages. There are only 3 steps to write a successful schematic. 1 is to process the CLI command. 2 is to set up a change, whatever that means. You can be changing 1 file, you can be changing 2 files, 100 files, it doesn't matter. There is a part responsible for setting the change, and there is a part that persisted in the file system. That's it, no more. Okay, so let's get to the more details. So I've been nerding out the stuff. I've been trying to make sense of it. I spent a whole month looking at the source code, not only Angular, also all kinds of extensions I could find, all kinds of libraries. I also look into the NX CLI, and I nerd out the thing. So here we go. Fasten your seatbelts, because I'm about to show you. So the 3 stages I already discussed, and I thought, how can I relate to it? Me as an Angular developer, I definitely have seen this stuff before. And it's right, you did, because it's pretty much your application. Think about it this way. The CLI part is your UI, is the user interface. You're just used to HTML and event class and even the listeners and, property bindings and stuff like this. But now your interface is the CLI. So it's exactly the same. It's the whole point is to get an input from you to tell the next step, called the logic step, to make sense of it, and then create a change, and then persisted the data. So if you are an Angular developer, think about it this way. UI is my component, logic is my state, and data is my service. It's just that the difference is UI is not HTML, it's actually a JSON file. Logic is not a state management system with behavior subject, it's just TypeScript class. And then the data is not my HTTP service, it's just a file system connector, but it's pretty much the same. So it's it was pretty stunned to me to see that it's pretty much the same. Nothing changes. It's still 3 stages. It's just that it's done differently, right? But it's pretty much the same. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's get to the anatomy of the schematics. So I'm going to throw some buzzwords, and without going into very, very deep explaining an example of this, but I'm going to tell you some buzzwords that you can just memorize and know where to put it, okay? So when I talk about collections, which is the configuration of my schematic, when I talk about schema, or when I talk about options of my schema, or when I talk about context or string utility classes, it's going to be the CLI section. So it's going to be the UI. Okay, so for example, a collection is where I set up all the things, then the schema and options is going to be my parameters I can put to my schematics as an option object. Context is stuff that, you know, can contain a logger interface because, you know, you want to log things as you go. And then that's it. Then you go to the setup in the change part. That is actually the most important part, because, you know, the UI is just, you know, taking the input from the user, combine it into some, you know, actionable steps, and then executing those steps is the next part. So in here, you're gonna see things like rules and chains and template functions and read TypeScript nodes. So one thing I really learned when developing the schematics was the TypeScript. So you literally need to go and understand what is a TypeScript node. You need to understand its read-only thing, and, you know, what is AST, which is abstract syntax tree, and what are the different declarations. So you can have a class declaration, interface declaration, you can have property interfaces are different than classes, and you can have a scopes, private, public, and so on. So you really gotta understand those domains to be very, very very good at doing this. But literally, schematics has to generate the files, and specifically the one I'm using is to generate the TypeScript files. Well, sometimes HTML as well, but in general, think about it like TypeScript. So you got to understand how TypeScript, what TypeScript is combined from, right? So it's pretty important. Then the last part is the persisting. So you have something called host. A host is sort of a representation of your file system, or some kind of a folder structure, right? So you gotta make some things like begin update and then commit the update. So it's sort of like transactional in databases, right? So you want to say, oh, I'm beginning the transaction, I make the calls, and then I do the like confirm that I commit that. The reason is to keep things atomic, because, you know, you don't want to have a file system that is halfly done in your whole operation. You want to actually do everything or nothing. So this is why you need those things. And then also you have things like recorder, which is literally working on a specific file. And then it will have methods like insert left. It will also have insert right and remove. There's a slight difference between these first two. But in general, think about recorder is just like you take the snapshot from your file and you can put changes into it. And then it will record those changes in a file system. When everything is done, host, commit, update, and you're done. And the file is saved. And then the changes, you have different types of changes. You have insert change and remove change and replace change. So generally, the difference between them is like when you do the insert change, you gotta say, at this position, I wanna insert that text. That's it. When you say remove, you wanna say, I wanna remove text or sort of a part of TypeScript file from this position to that position. And it's removed. And then the recorder is updating the new indexes and new positions along the way. And then if you want to do the replace, well, it's a little bit more tricky, because you want to say, I want to go from this position to that position and replace it with this text. But generally, the idea is you want to keep it in your persisting layer. And I'm going to show you an example of the code I have done. So you can, it's going to be more understandable for you. Okay. so let's get to what schematics can do for you. Because, as I say, it's not only about generating the file. So let me open a... Okay, so here we go. I have a very basic Angular app, right? It's basic. So I have my app component. I have the schematics I'm going to be using, and that's it. Really, it's empty. It's empty space, and I also added a Firebase to it. So let's look what we can do. So one of the very first thing you want to do is going to be a CRUD example to keep it simple and fast. But I'm going to show you what is the productivity boost. So hey, let's create a simple e-commerce. So what you can do, you can go ahead and create something called page. So you go ahead and say, what is the name of the page? Well, it's a home page. What is the URL? Well, it's just a slash, it's home. There we go. Something has happened, right? And look, yeah, sure, I created 4 files, but I also updated one. That's pretty cool. So if you look here, oh, it created the pages folder, it created the home page for me, it created the routes definition, it created the module, and it added the module into here. That's pretty cool. Okay, let's have a look what we have. Yeah. And let's just put some hello home. I told you it's not going to be hello world, huh? Hello home is not hello world, technically. Here you go. So I got my home page. Right, what can I do next? Well, I need to create a product thing, right? Business came to me and said, hey, give me the products. All right, cool, I'll do it, the products. So what I can do? Well, literally, I can go and say, create something called a resource. So it will come and say, what is the resource name? Well, it's product. What are the properties of the product? Well, it has product has a name, which is a string, and it has a price, which is the number. Boom. Okay, that's a lot more things has happened here. You can see. Okay, it's installing some packages. What has happened? Well, I got the project. I got my library set up. I bet not many people actually use libraries, but they are very handy. So I got my project set up, a new library with a public API, and aside of like the generic stuff, it's always created in Angular. I also have my application folder in which I have something called product DTO. And check it out. It's an interface with read-only properties. It's already added the ID for me, which is a string. That's how Firebase does it. And then it has a name and the price. Well, that's cool. Okay, but you know, it's sort of just an interface. What can I do with it? Well, what you can do is to create a form. So you could go, what is the product? What is the resource? Well, it's a product. It's always a product. And then, well, in this example, of course. And then what is the form component name? Well, I want to add product. Here we go. What are the form fields? So it's not really the TypeScript. It's now the fields types, the input types. So, well, I would like to add the name, which is of type text, and add a price, which is of type number. Here we go. So, okay, it did quite a few stuff. It updated some module for me. How does it look like? Oh, wow, it did 2 things. So first, it created a Firebase product service. And I have my Firebase client injected, and I have my add method, and call the product collection on the product collection name. And it also did the UI, which is the product. I decided not to generate this the tests for simplicity. Formatting is slightly off, but in general, hey, I have a form with those names I just provided. I also have an ng on submit, which calls that service and already resets for me. It has a form builder and the product service. And then also in the template, it's already a template for me. Wow, that's pretty cool. So what I can do? Well, I need to add that product thing into my page. So what I can do is to do lib add. Oh, it already sees it. That's pretty cool. Well, it ceases because I'm already adding this into all those modules, so it's pretty neat. Let's and sometimes the build server doesn't actually make it fast, is not fast enough to relate. Let's do. Okay, everything successfully completed. Here we go. I got the product. So let me just clean my Firebase database for it. Just a second. I just make sure this is what I connect to. Just bear with me 1 sec. So I'm connecting to testing features. Okay, let me find that. Okay. So in my Firebase, I just deleted that thing. So let's add the product. So I would like to add the product. Angular Nation testing is gonna be free. And here we go. Things are happening. So I can add, of course, more than just this. So what I can do is add maybe superior awesome course for $9, $9.99 or $99. Okay, cool. So I've added a bunch of stuff. So what we can do now, well, you know, it's pretty basic, and bear in mind that I didn't care so much about the CSS and so on. I just want to show you what you can actually do. So here we go. So I need to now generate a list, right? I want to see it. So what I can do is to call another schematic I prepared for you called list. And then I'm going to say it's a product resource. What is the list? Well, it's a product list. And that's it. That's great. So now I have another component that has already, look at this. I mean, you don't have to worry about it in your company, right? How many times you had to tell someone on pull request that, I don't know, use async pipes, don't use the subscribe in ng on init, or stuff like this. Schematics can solve it for you because it can actually work with your coding style in a company. And then you see, it's generating this code that I consider to be the most appropriate for my company. And then maybe I just, you know, show name and price. Okay, so the only thing left is to add it into the page. So it's product list. Cool. Here you go. These are the two things. If I want to add something, Greg something, whatever, check it out. It's working. So that's it. How much time did it pass? 5 minutes? Sure, it's not beautiful, I know, but it's not the point. The point is to make it beautiful now and work closer with business and so on. So among all this stuff, I can also show you that it's not only creation of the files. For example, I give an example of the service. You see, it's the same service. I can add things to it. I don't have to just create files. You can modify the files. You can remove the files. You can do all kinds of stuff. So I hope it was I gave you some light, but let's get even deeper. So the question I always hear is, can I test schematics? And the answer is absolutely. I even think you should. It's like, I can't imagine not testing it. It's because, you know, making a part where I have to rebuild my schematics, go to my project, invoke it, see what has changed in so many files is really time consuming. So I want to actually develop my schematics in isolation. So the way I'm going to do it is I want to test it in acceptance mare, which is like really end to end. So I want to literally execute the schematic. Then I want to go into the logic part that will get processed. And then on the save, I want to mock it with something that Angular team already provided us with, which is the host app tree. It's called a unit test tree. Idea is it's literally the same as the host you would use normally on your file system, except that it works in a memory. So it's much faster, much better, and it gives you some nice API to actually test things. So the other question is, can I do TDD on it? Well, let's see. Maybe you can. I'm going to do my best to show that you can. So here we go. So let's close all that, and let's go into the schematics. So inside my schematics, I created something called in the component, I created something add property and add. So I have a test and I have a code. Oops, sorry, not like I wanted. Okay, here we go. So let's just make it small. Cool. So a lot of times I'm being asked, like, so a lot of times people say, how do I even get started? Like, I don't know what I want to code. And in TDD, you want to write the test first, and then you write the code. So it's very abstract for people. Then I always say, write the comments. Just write them comments and make sure you follow them. Okay, so I already wrote the comments. So you can also see that the schematics is sort of working. So I have a passing test because I already set it up, the collection name and all the stuff. So what happens is, so I have my, maybe move it slightly here. I have my describe block here. So you have something called unit test tree. This is, as I said, this is literally a host that will do all the heavy work for you. It's the whole environment. It's system under test. Then I want to actually, and it starts with the empty file system, right? So you need to set up your Angular stuff. So what I do normally, I set up a, so I set up a context. A context is something pretty simple. I execute a bunch of schematics to set me up with the Angular workspace. So I have my Angular workspace, I have my Angular application, and I create the library for it, right? Pretty straightforward. So now I have given a library context. So I know I have an application and I have a library. So what I can do? Well, I can set up a component because what I want to do is to add a property to component. So in order to do it, I need to have a component. So I already have a function that is reusable across my schematics that sets up a component with the name myComponent. All right. So when I execute that, nothing really happens because I just created a bunch of file system. Okay, what can I do next? Well, I would like to execute my schematic, which I call, I hope you can see it. Can you see it? Or should I make a font size bigger?
Bigger.
Bigger. Okay. Sorry. Size. Here we go. That should be much better. How do I refactor? No, how is the? I'd like to format it. Someone knows the shortcut for formatting? Okay, anyway, I'll try to make it more lines. Okay, so I want to execute my schematic and I provide two options. One is called component name, one is called property name. And then you gotta provide the previous state of your file system, which is the app tree. And then you assign it to the new state of your file system. So here we go. I'm gonna execute the schematic, but nothing really happens. So what I wanna do is I want to get the component content. So I already also have a function to this, get component content. I need to provide a app tree into it. And then the next one is the, I would like to get the my, oh, sorry, I'll make it a new line. My component, and then I want to get the TS file from it. So this is something I already prepared. I also can show you. So literally what it does, it takes this tree, the app tree, and then it goes to the appropriate folder that I already, I have a convention for it, which is the libs, project name, and so on. And then it will go to the predefined UI folder, and it will prefix with the name of the component, and then it will do the component.name.ts, because I can also test on HTML, right? So here we go. I have my content, and I can also show you. I can make it a warm to be more verbose, more visible. Let me execute that. You see, it created the component, it found it, all good. Okay, so what I can do? Well, I'd like to assert something. So what I can do is to say expect component content to contain what I would like. Well, I know I'm going to be using the myprop. So I would like to have a myprop of type string equals, oh yeah, I make it this quotes to be more verbose, equals ABC, and that's it. That's what I want. I want this content, content of my component to contain that information. Of course, it's much easier with libraries like tsmorph that actually can parse the AST of your TypeScript, but it's not a scope of this call. So let's check it out. What's going to happen if I call this? Well, I should fail because I don't have this in my component. And sure enough, I failed. He said, hey, I didn't find my prop string ABC inside of this. So what? So I need to code it, right? And again, I don't know what to do. How do I get started? Well, again, write the comments. Remember the 3 stages I teach you? Yeah, make the process input, make the logic, and process the data. That's it. You don't have to think more. Okay, so let's get it done. What we can do is we can process the input. So from the options, I just remove the property name. I have my component name, and I also have this component data object, which is really a function that returns me the path to my TypeScript file, which literally, based on some parameters, can build a path for me. So that's it about the processing the input. It's, if you don't have a lot of optional parameters in your option, it's going to be very simple. The more optional parameters you add, the more difficult it becomes. So that's why sometimes you have to strike the balance. Okay, then I want to persist the data. I already have something called update TS class, because I don't want to put all this in one place. I want to reuse that function, right? I want to use it in so many other places. Like every schematic is updating the TS file. So how does it do it? Well, it will build some magic. I'm going to explain in a second, and then it will get from the host. It will say, hey, start making changes, then apply the changes to the recorder. And actually, a lot of those things is already provided for you from Angular CLI. But if it's not, your good guess is to go to NX CLI. And if it's not, then you can just copy over. And that's what I did. So apply recorder will actually listen for the changes, because I can have multiple changes. And it will insert left or remove or pretty much say, hey, I don't know what type of change you made. So you have to prepare something called changes, like sort of a magic thing. And then you want to say, I finished my updates on this set of files, and just return the host. So why is it important? Well, it's important because if something breaks in here, you don't want to commit the change. And it's also important because, you have this Control-Z shortcut, which is the undo part. Well, that's how the undo redo works, really. You want to get back to the previous stage. So this is why it's important. Here we go. So, okay, this is the persisting the data. So how do I make the logic for it? I need something called feature data. This is something I came up with myself. You can model it the way you want. But among doing a lot of schematics, I saw that it's always the same drill. You always have to deal with importing something on top of the TS file. You have to modify maybe property, modify a method, or do some other stuff, and maybe modify the constructor, which adding the dependency, and that's it, right? That's like 99% of my use cases. So what I can do, I can create something, feature data, and I can make a typed property, which is really a string formatter, right? So when I go there, you can see I have things like, I have my tabulation, and then I say make a type variable, so make the name of the variable and its type, which literally is just adding the two dots, the colon between them, and then also if rapid add the semicolon and a new line, right? So it's not super fancy, but the point is, what I want to do is take the prop name, make it a string, and make it a string value of 1 to 3. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, we have some fail. Right, because in my test I say ABC, and in here I said 1 to 3. So I need to change that. And doing that mistake in the middle of very advanced application and removing files and adding them and so on is very expensive. I mean, it takes a lot of time. And here, perfect test environment. I don't have to deal with it. Okay, cool. So this is super basic example. Let's go a little bit deeper. Because sure, I just added the property, right? It's not exciting. So let's get to, it's a smart component. Smart component is supposed to work with observables. So what I can do, I can say, hey, I would like that. I always start with the test. Observable, because I want to say what I want, right? The first step is hard, but then it just goes. And I would like to make this observable off. And, again, just a second. Okay. Oh yeah, sorry, it shouldn't be here. Okay. And again, if I generate this code, my TypeScript file will fail because observable is something from the outside. It's actually easy to get imported. So I have something called expect import, and then I say, well, on this file, expect a observable that comes from RxJS. Cool. Let me execute that because you want to get to the red stage. Okay, red. Well, I didn't find an observable. I mean, this is fine. Well, this is also not fine because the observable is missing. So let's change that. So what I can do is to the type to add the generic observable string and the value of ABC. Cool. Running. Oh no, I'm failing again. Well, it's because you forgot the import. Okay, well, luckily I have that modeled already for me. So I can just say symbol name is observable and the import path is RxJS. Cool. I run that. Everything should be fine. Yeah, it's fine. So it also, I also should make sure that the off operator is from RxJS is imported. So let me run this. That's gonna fail. And then in here, I can just, oh, sorry, comma. I can just add another import from RxJS, which is the off. Here we go. Everything is passing. So, but it could be a false positive. I never trust. When my test passed twice in a row, I always get suspicious. So what I can do is to make it fail for sure, and then see the outcome. And then Well, it actually looks legit. It even added it's smart enough to figure it out that observable and off is both from RxJS, so just add it in one line. Obviously, in your company, it can be different. You can configure it. So that's it, really. This is just a taste. And I hope by now you see you can do TDD. At this point, there is not much to refactor, so I wouldn't do it. But more, when there is more things that are complex, you want to make sure you also follow the refactor stage. Not every single cycle, but once in a while you should do it. Cool. So let's get to the presentation and sum it up and get to the questions, because I spent a lot of time. Sorry for this. Okay, the aftermath. What I've learned. It's not all roses, right? There are some things you have to bear in mind. One of it, well, let's start with the positive. They are awesome. They are really awesome. But writing UI can be very limiting because, I want to create a component, but maybe I want to create it in some special folder or something less conventional. As long as it's less conventional, I need to provide it as a parameter. That gets tricky. No one likes to type in the src/app/whatever because it's just cumbersome. So sometimes the other types of UIs are better, but hey, it's a great way to get started. Composing complex UI by invoking multiple schematics. Actually, this is pretty cool. I can invoke a schematic into a schematic, which means if I miss some parameters, it will ask me. So that way I can have a master schematic asking me the basics, and then more specific schematics that will ask me additional questions, and you can make it conditional. So it's pretty cool. You actually can create pretty nice CLI UIs for it. Another thing is that it still requires some boilerplate. All the stuff we saw, I had to write myself. It's not really publicly available. And some of it is through Angular CLI, but not really. Some of it is just, part of their own library that's not exported publicly. And you just have to learn it and copy it over and call it in external or something like this. Another thing is that many optional parameters. Be aware of optional parameters, because optional parameter means if statement, and if statement means complexity. So you want to be careful with that. I actually like to strike the balance. If I start adding extra parameters that are optional, then I will probably create two schematics and just say, hey, this schematic is for this type of class and this schematic is for this type of class. And keeping 3-layer architecture is very important. Trust me. You can have sub-layers in those layers as well, but keep it to these 3 minimum layers. Get the input from the user, process the logic. That can contain a lot of stuff there, and then persist the data, which is pretty generic. And then testing is really your friend, and I would say, frankly, necessary. I mean, without the testing, I think it's going to be much harder. Okay, so the summary is schematics are much more than just code creation. I hope you know it by now. 3 layers architecture, UI, logic, and data. And I hope you saw how to test the schematics. I understand it was a lot. So before we get to questions, hey, let's get in touch. If you have more questions and more you would like to see the code samples, you would like to do this, it's not really anywhere open source or whatever, but I can give it to you. It's no biggie. Just shoot me a message on my Twitter, and if you really liked it, please mention that on Twitter as well with my handle, because I have only 300 followers, and I hope I deliver a little bit better than just 300 developers. So I would really appreciate if you support me in building my network. But let's get to questions. So do you guys have any questions? Could it be that I don't hear? Can someone say something? Oh, okay, I can hear. Good. Hey, please do.
Hey, Greg. Thanks very much for this presentation. It was very beneficial. I mean, you get really deep into the schematics. I have some questions to ask. I will start with the first one. Do you think that it is worth to write and add or an update schematic if you only want to install or update your library?
Well, I would really ask myself, does my library require a configuration, right? Because if it's just npm install, I wouldn't really do it. Probably, but it also depends. Some people really like, for example, Angular Fire. I really like the ng-add, right? I just do, and it asks me a bunch of questions, connect my Google account. It's really cool. So, but it does require a lot of configuration, right? I don't think I would like to follow the documentation on someone's page and do it. So it really depends. Do you need to configure anything to get it working? And quite often you need, because do you want to support one or two environments? One being plain Angular, another being NX, right? So it's different. I know sometimes it can be the workspace, the JSON file that's important. Sometimes it can be Angular JSON file that's important. You need to sometimes get that information about the projects to understand the folder structure of the consumer of your library, right? So I would say depends on if it's complex or not.
Cool, thanks a lot.
But you had more questions, right?
Yeah, just want to take all the time from the others to ask.
Okay.
So if anyone doesn't ask anything, I will pop in.
So does anyone have question?
Yeah,
Going one,
I can
going
go with
twice.
my second one, Connie, if it's okay.
Okay.
Can we invoke a schematic from a non-CLI environment?
Very good question. To be honest, I'm thinking about it because I didn't have to use this. I would not recommend it, but define a schematic, right? Because you see, you have 3 layers, right? So you have the UI, which is really the schematic part. Then you have the logic, that's reusable. You can make it a part of the library and put it on API, on Node.js API or something like this. So I would say a lot of this stuff, like you should treat schematics as the UI from the CLI, right? But you can replace it. You can call it from REST endpoint, or you can call it from WebSockets, or you can call it from queue system. You can do so many stuff, but just make sure the logic is the same. And then there is a bit of an issue with how do you persist the files, right? For example, I sometimes use VS extensions. I build myself, stuff like this, more on that in the future. But in general, I literally invoke the same code from both schematics and the VS Code. So VS Code can be also a UI.
Yeah. Like NX console, for example.
Yeah, the NX console, sure, but it's also CLI, right? So it's sort of same but different, you can say. But generally, yeah, you just need a terminal, invoke a couple of methods, and that's why it's really, really cool, really powerful. But yeah, I think about it. You could put it on the cloud, right? You can put it on REST endpoints. And by the way, a lot of like WebStorm, for example, it's supporting Kotlin, which is the actual Java, right? And they don't support the TypeScript, but then you could make an API on your schematics and just port the Kotlin to invoke a API calls. So it's another world, right? Somewhere in the space where you're at right now.
Yeah. I have a use case that I would like to ask.
Sure.
This question. Okay, thanks for your answer. But I have another question that is concerned with testing. I have created a schematic, an ng-add schematic that modifies the workspace, the Angular.json file. So I have also written some code inside for error purposes. For example, I throw a schematic exception. If I want to test this schematic, should I test only the happy path, for example, that it updates the Angular.json file, or should I go also for the exceptions that I throw?
So First thing, go with the happy path, but I rarely only go happy paths. I actually test the exceptions too, because they are very important. So I would test them, yeah. And the way you do it, you create the expect, and then you wrap the schematic in a function, and then you can call to throw error, and then you check the error message. So yeah, do that. I would do it.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for questions. Here we go. One more question, please do.
Hi, thanks for the explain. It's clear. I got just one question. Your schematic can generate a component here, but it also generates the test part of the component, or no?
It can generate the tests of the components and stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, it doesn't. But it's something in my mind. So glad you asked. I can see people actually care. How many of you really care about tests being generated for schematics? Because if you are, I'll do it. Okay. Next time, give me a couple of months and I'll come with the testing thing.
This is Earl. I was just curious about this because we use NX quite a bit as well. And when writing the pipelines, it's very much about a command line thing. So that was one of the things I wanted to see on here. And so the testing is interesting because you want to be able to see what, like, you don't have access to the cloud, right? But you're doing a lot of schematics, maybe NX, NG, different packages. If you have a test, though, you can run that pipeline locally and sort of verify what it is doing. Normally you only catch the issue when it's already running on the cloud. It's a little too late then. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, absolutely true. So actually, quite often, what helps, because it really depends. I'm also a CTO in a company. So, for example, when I see a developer rushing through the code and just put it, because sometimes there's this mentality, I just put it on CI and I figured it out what happens. Well, that's not a good mentality because you really want to not break the master, right? So you want to test that before that, or make sure it's actually working. And sometimes CI is too late. People take coffee and forget about it, and it's wasting time, right? So what I recommend then people is to use the Git hooks. So you can hook into the push and then run at least a unit test, because it depends on a test suite. Obviously the end-to-end will be working forever. That's why CI is for. But at least the unit test, run it before you push it, and it can be automated as well. Yeah. And with NX Cloud, it can be distributed, so it's even better.
Agreed. Thank you for that.
All right. If there are no more questions, well, first of all, really thank you guys stayed and listened to my blabbing. I know it can be a headache, but hey, I put a lot of heart into it. I really try to go deeper. If you have any use cases or anything or any questions, I'm all in to help. So you can leave a comment, contact me on Twitter or whatever, and I'll be very happy to help, because I think it's important to actually spread love about schematics as well.
I think the schematic concept is great, and I think other framework uses it, right? Like React and Vue.
Yeah, and they are very independent, right? You could make Node.js applications on this as well, so it will be very fun. Yeah.
Yeah, because my company hire a vendor. They write a library to generate generate the skeleton code for Nest.js surfaces and controller. I don't know if it is schematic or just or they write TypeScript code to generate a file. But I think they have the idea. Probably lack the tool that Angular provide.
Yeah, and we even thought about generating schematics for PHP files, because just because it's written in Node.js and using Angular, it doesn't mean it cannot generate any other types of files.
Yeah, actually, I have a question regarding to that, what you just said. So what is the limit?
Yeah, I think, thanks for the question, Kamil. I think the limit is really the UI. I think at some point, you're not gonna really go far with it. Like, you see all those rules I've coded, they are pretty hard, like the component name is like this, but it's in this folder, and it has to be in this folder. Otherwise, it's gonna, you have to do a lot of tree parsing, file system parsing to figure it out what is the best place to actually put it. So you have to have some solid conventions. But if your project is a mess, sorry to say that, but if it is, then I would say you're not going to benefit from it. First, make sure you standardize your file system, right? Because if sometimes you put services in the services folder, the other time you put it in infrastructure. Just an example. Schematic will not figure it out, or you will write a lot of logic to actually understand what's happening. And the more use cases will come, and it will get more difficult. So there is a limit to it, I would say. Yeah.
Right, thank you. That makes sense.
Do you need to check your schematic code when Angular has a new version, like to see if you generate something that is deprecated in the latest version?
Yeah, you need to. You can go. You have to be up to date. But it's also a great thing, because imagine something. So you generated a bunch of code. That's some code. Now the update comes in, and what do? Right? You need to run a migration on existing files to change it. So again, you write it in. That's why how ng update is working, right? It just updates those things for you. So it's really, really handy. But maybe your coding standard change. Maybe you used to inject a services in root, and now you don't because of the lazy loading or whatever. Well, you see, you got a problem, because you got to fix those files first and then move forward. So it is a bit problematic. You got to keep it up to date. Yeah, it's a maintenance. Yeah, please do.
Do you have an example of the ng update schematic? I was looking for an example some time ago, but I couldn't find anything, that I could use before actually uploading the schematic to the package registry. Because the problem with the ng update is that even if you link the package locally, sometimes some things don't work because the update and the add schematics are a bit weird.
Yeah, I don't. Sorry, no, I didn't go that far with it. So that's the thing. There's not much thing going on in the thing. You gotta figure it out. Yeah, sorry, but yeah, maybe the testing is lucky, right? Because things fail on random. But I mean, no, it's hard. It is hard. That's why we need to put this effort to actually, make it more commoditized, more common for people. But yeah, as soon as I find, let me know too, because I didn't find anything.
There are many. There is a public API that someone can use for working with schematics, but it is not widely known because it is hidden inside the code, and it isn't in any documentation website. So you need to search for that in the code or in other places. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, does anyone have a question for Gray? Wow. Well, if there's no question, then we can wrap up the meetup. So it's the tradition to turn on the camera and say thank you to the speakers. Well, my camera is turned on, so thank you, Gray.
Thank you.
Very
Thanks, Gray.
impressive. Yeah. I can imagine like like one command can generate an HTML page and form and components. Like in 10 minutes, you build a really like basic like application with the CSS. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
So okay, so I just want to like make a point to ask everyone to follow Grace's Twitter. Sometimes he has like suddenly he types a long tweet about something really insightful in Angular. So you never know what he will say, but you will learn something or get confused. It's either one. So thank you, Gray. Yeah. So I hope to see you on Tuesday, next Tuesday. So thank you so much. So let me think. I think the next meetup is on March. So please join if you have time. Even though the speaker hasn't provided a topic, I'll chase him too, so that like everyone can decide to come or not. So thank you. So let me end the recording. Okay.